In his dark room he is finally alone, with spools of suffering set out in ordered rows. The only light is red, and softly glows as though this were a church, and he, a priest preparing to intone a mass. Belfast, Beirut, Phnom Penh, all flushes grass. He has a job to do. Solutions slop in trays beneath his hand, which did not tremble then, though seem to now. Rural England, home again to ordinary pain, which simple weather can dispel, to fields which don't explode beneath the feet of running children in a nightmare heat. Something is happening. A stranger's features faintly start to twist before his eyes, a half-formed ghost. He remembers the cries of this man's wife, how he sought approval without words to do what someone must, and how the blood stained into foreign dust. 100 agonies in black and white, from which his editor will pick out 5 or 6 for Sunday's supplement. The reader's eyeballs prick with tears between the bath and pre-lunch beers. From the aeroplane, he stares impassively at where he earns his living, and they do not care. In War Photographer, Carol Ann Duffy exhibits the global issue Politics, Power, and Justice, where she specifically reveals the psychological impact of war through post-traumatic symptoms and war visual imagery, while juxtaposing two worlds, revealing the injustice and the inequality of war. In the first stanza, Duffy introduces the war photographer. There is a visual imagery in a double entendre of a photography darkroom and a darkly lit room. This creates a tone of desolation which corroborates to the footage selected in the video. The elements of color are essential to support the overall atmosphere of this poem. The black and white represents the war photographer's dullness and lack of emotion. This represents the emptiness the war photographer feels and the solemnity of the poem. Black and white also provides a more authentic and appropriate feel for war footage. The red color scheme in the video correlates to the implicit and explicit visual imagery of red in the poem, lines 13 and 18 being explicit and lines 7, 11, and 12 being implicit. Carol Ann Duffy presents this visual imagery in order to present the chaos and horrors of war, and how the horrors of war have caused him to undervalue a human life, as there is visual imagery of blood and pain and suffering. Line 5 is also a biblical reference to Isaiah, which means all life will eventually perish and go back to the earth. Duffy reveals the horrors of war from an unusual perspective through this biblical reference, which is also shown in the footage of a priest in the images. However, the color scheme is red to present it in a dark way rather than the usual holy way, holistic way. In the second stanza, line 7 is a very direct statement that creates a tone of unattachment. He tries not to feel a direct connection to the people. This also broke that stream of consciousness as he was thinking about the tragedies in the earlier Ascenditon. This demonstrates the psychological impact of war as continued on by Duffy stating his hands were trembling as he attempts to work. This visual imagery of PTSD symptoms is represented in the video footage as well. Line 10 shows how he missed the simple ordeals he had to face in the peaceful rural England. The metaphor, simple weather can dispel, is like saying to let your problems go with the wind, and that time can fix everything. In the video, the use of nature imagery along with a vibrant filter with the effect of rain dispelling presents this contrast between war-torn countries and countries at peace. Lines 11 and 12 juxtapose the peaceful atmosphere of peaceful weather to war explosions, which shows the war photographer's unstable state of mind. This further supports Duffy's representation of the injustice of peace, as there is a disparity between the two worlds, which is implied to be unjust and unequitable. In stanza 4, there is a flashback as the war photographer develops an image at home. This flashback is a symptom of the psychological impact of war, as the trauma and the agonies constantly haunt him. Dehumanization is also seen in line 15 of A Half-Formed Ghost. He recalls the life draining from the man. In the video, this is represented by the symbol of the wife's mouth with an X. This represents the millions of voices that go unheard during wars, as families are constantly torn apart. The silence reveals war is a moral crime on humanity, as it sacrifices lives, peace, families, and tranquility. The last stanza emphasizes the contrast between the chaos in war-torn countries and the blissful ignorance of countries at peace throughout the turmoil. In line 19, there's a metaphorical use of agonies instead of photographs. This creates a painful image of despair and pain. It conveys the painful job he has to capture the painful moments, yet only very few are selected. Lines 21 to 22 is directly comparing the two worlds. He is experiencing the real pain of war. Meanwhile, people in his original hometown only get to see a glimpse through a photograph. Duffy uses a condescending tone towards people who try to be empathetic, but in the end, don't truly care. This demonstrates the disparity of quality of life between countries in turmoil and countries at peace. Lines 23 to 24. The war photographer is moving on to the next war zone and taking photographs, and the tone is very desolated with loss of hope, which is why he states they do not care. Overall, this is a cry for change. War traumatizes individuals and leaves entire countries paralyzed and shaken. Duffy successfully presents this critical global issue of the injustice of war through the unusual perspective of a war photographer to provide Western audiences with social commentary on the true horrors of war.